Okay, so the document that you're going to download, found on the Moodle, is shoe catalog template, and it says fall 2017, but we're obviously spring 2018. But what you're going to have inside of it is the shoe catalog template, right? This is the InDesign file. Remember that links folder that we were talking about, and the document fonts folder, okay? This template folder that I have opened after I unzipped it is your packaged InDesign file. Okay, whatever you create in InDesign, you can package out. All right. So here's the fonts that I used. I only have one link here, and in my InDesign document, INDD file, I have an IDML file. And this is an InDesign document file type that can be opened in previous versions of InDesign. Previous than 2015, well, previous versions. They update it all the time. But if you don't have the latest version of InDesign, the 2018 version, and the INDD file doesn't work, your IDML file will do the same thing. And then you can just save it as an InDesign file from there. Okay. So once you open the template file, you're going to see the template, and right away, what you're going to want to do, because you can see that these shoe images here are all the same. And you can see the quality of this image is pretty good. So you can see kind of the individual stitching and so on and so forth. What you want to do first in InDesign is actually make these shoe images, since we're only focusing on the layout at this point, make your shoe images medium res. When you make a medium resolution, you're going to save a lot of RAM on your machine, so it's not going to be skipping around like it is right here, see? So go ahead to View when you open it, and then jump down to Display Performance, and then hit Typical Display. You see how I checked High Quality Display? I'll hit Typical Display, and it's going to look like this. So remember when I said, like, when you have all of these images placed in here, and each one, let's say, is a couple megs big, like maybe it's like 10 or 20 megs, which is typical for a live example of a shoe catalog, then you know, with the photography level of photography that's used, you're going to want to work in that mode while you're working on the layout. So this catalog here, you can see has these magenta labels on every page. So if I open the Pages panel, I can see all of the pages in this entire template. Okay, you know, 1 through, this is 20 pages, including the front and back cover. So InDesign has a Pages panel right here, but it also has a Layers panel too, just like in Photoshop. The Layers panel breaks out layers within the layout, very similar to Photoshop will, okay? The very top layer I have here is called the magenta layer. That is really just a placeholder as a guide. So I can turn this layer on or off by hitting this eyeball icon. And I can see my text, my front cover text, then turning on or off. That is just so you can see where things are going to go as we work through the assignment. All right? So remember when we had those 3 categories that we chose, the A, B, and C categories? Well, I have section A, section A, section A. Okay, I numbered out all of the number of shoes or products that you brought, you know, got in your assets folders and stuff. I just basically built this design based on the amount of product, shoes, what have you. Okay, and then here's the section, right? So if this section was like boys' shoes, then I would have my boys' shoe section name here. Okay, so let me show you an example of one that I put together of a different brand altogether. So this is a template. It uses the same layout, but this section was called men. Okay, and then I had some art, and then I have my men's shoes here in that section. Okay, so that kind of gives you a sense. The background is different. The type is different. Everything's different except for the shoe type, the brand, and the covers and so on. So here's like a cover, front cover, inside front cover, and then the next page, okay? But this is where it started, okay? So does it make sense so far, everybody? Okay. See how I have these, so again, this magenta layer is I'm just gonna turn it off while I'm working on the layout, okay? I have these different layers here too, right? So type, it's all pretty organized, surprise. I organized all this stuff so it's really easy. You can lock up these layers. If you want to click and drag and not select any of your type, you can do that. Just lock it up here in your type layer. You can turn it off or on, what have you. Shoes, same thing. So shoes or products, you can rename this products if that's what you want to do. On or off, lock or unlock. Folio, it's locked. The folio really is, might not be on that layer, sorry. So the folio is here. This is actually on the type layer. But really the folio is your current page number. This actually will change based on how many pages my document has, etc., where it's showing up. So I'll show you how to do the page numbers in the future, but it's basically just a placeholder element that changes to current page number. And it's pretty easy to use. All right. So that's that. You will notice also that on page 1, right here is what it looks like when you open up the template. On page 1, you're going to see a shoe that has like a shadow on it. Actually, all the shoes on this page have the shadow on it. But then all the following pages, they don't. See, this doesn't have a shadow at all. This shadow is actually 2 layers of the same product grouped together. Why is that done? Is because I don't want to save this shoe more than once in one PSD file, and I don't want to trace out that shadow more than once. Again, because I don't want to do more work than I have to. Okay, and I just want to be efficient. That's all I want in my life. Okay, so this file here is actually grouped together. Okay, so I'm going to do Command-Shift-G. That's ungroup. This is the same as Illustrator, I do believe. And now you can see that I have a solid outline here rather than a dotted one. Command-G. I grouped them. Command-Shift-G. I ungrouped them. If you want to use your file menu, you can go to Object, Group, or Ungroup, whichever one over here in the Object menu. But they're ungrouped now, and I'm going to split them apart. I'm going to move one past the other, and I'll actually shift-click both of these so I have both selected. And I'm going to go to View, Display Performance, and High Quality Display, just to see what the high quality looks like on these shoes specifically alone. And you can see here that this shadow, it kind of acts like it normally would in kind of context here, so see how these lines kind of shine through a little bit. Now, I don't have to actually like cut the shadow out perfectly. I'm using an object layer style for it. So if I click the shadow layer, and then I go over to the effects panel here, I have these object layer options right here. So remember, we had all of these options in Photoshop too. So you had screen, multiply, soft light, luminosity, all in between. I have multiply set for this. If I had set it to normal, and I zoomed in here, you can see the line, the edge of where the shadow ends and begins, or that layer specifically. An easier way to see that, I could just drag kind of this shape here. I'm going to throw it to the back. So I just Command Shift and left bracket on my keyboard. Otherwise, you can go to Object. Where is it? Object. Oh, no, wait, it's not there. It's where did I put it? No, it's somewhere around here. Oh, arrange. Okay, so it's object arrange. Bring to front, bring forward, backward, so on. Send to back. That's the one to really learn the shortcuts with, right? Anyhow, again, I'll click on that shadow, go under effects, and then hit multiply. And then you can see now, like whatever background I put there, it's going to be nicely overlaying over the back. So this is a really simple example, but again, it's all part of a broader kind of conversation. All right. So let me get rid of that. What is it about this image? So all of these shoes are basically, now I'm going to go over and do an example without a shadow, okay? All these shoes are placed. I'm going to go to my links panel, and I'm going to look and see that I actually have one file that's placed 88 times in the whole design. Okay, so this is the name of my file. This is the same file that was in my links folder. Well, that's the wrong links folder. This one, Nike demo _ small PSD file. And then here it is, Nike _ small PSD file. And it's saying literally that I have 88 placements of this file throughout the design, okay? This column here is telling me what page number I have this placed on. So if I had a bunch of different shoes, and I had my file names really organized clearly, I could navigate to it in the links panel, and I can click on the page number, to which that link was being displayed, and InDesign would jump me here to page 11 for this instance of this file. It's important to note that that you can have one file with multiple instances of that file, okay? So there's one thing. Instances also come in when we get into Animate too. Animate uses instances of objects as well. So it's all about just file managing here, managing our artwork, etc. So one thing to note. I'm going to click this image. So likewise, when I click an image on a pasteboard, on the pasteboard here, so what we're calling this spread here, it will highlight in the links panel this exact link and where it's showing up. If I drag this links panel up, and this has a lot of information in it, I can see a lot of things. So let me actually turn, it's probably easier. So there's a lot of information here. It'll tell you what type of file this is, right? A Photoshop file, what page it's on. Let's say you didn't have folios, that would be helpful. Otherwise, you'd have to open up your Pages panel and see it if that was required. Another thing, too, is that you can see the document color mode here, right? So my color space is CMYK. So I don't have to open this file in Photoshop now to see what color profile I'm working with. So that's very handy. I can go through this design and just click and check, click and check, click and check. I can check all of my different objects to see if I'm working in CMYK. This becomes important when you're prepping a file to send to a printer, right? Upon its approval. You don't want to send a printer a product with an RGB color file, because then they're going to have to go through their whole process of getting your native files, converting them to RGB, or using some other pre-press software to do that, and it's going to just cost more money. So just keep that in mind. Another thing to keep in mind also is this layers overrides here. And it says yes. So that means that I have layer overrides going on here. So my native Photoshop file has multiple layers. And InDesign is actually turning layers on or off of my Photoshop file to display this image. Now I'll show an example of that here soon. And then a lot of other information too. Probably most importantly is the actual PPI, so pixels per inch, actual and effective, okay? The actual is, this is how many pixels per inch this image has in its original format. So in Photoshop, this image would be 300 dpi or PPI, which is optimal print resolution. Sometimes this might say 72, then you'll know this file is too low. I mean, it's too low for the print purpose. If I'm working on a web project, then that would be okay. Effective PPI. This is based on the scale of the object. So if the original object is 300, like this one, right? We all talked about this file being the same, just duplicated each time. Well, this smaller instance of the file, the shoe image, we have an actual PPI of 300, but an effective of 987, so way over what it needs to be in effective, okay? Meaning that this is in reality what it's going to look like. So as long as you're over 300 in both actual and effective, you'll be good. Effective is less important than the actual, but the thing is that they both have to be at least 300. Okay. All right, let's get into this here. So I can actually, I'll click on one of these images, and I'm going to open this up in its native file. So you can do this in InDesign, just under my links panel actually. I can click this drop down here on the top right, and then usually I'll do, you can do edit original here, otherwise you can reveal it in Finder, but editing original will open it in Photoshop. I usually reveal it in Finder because sometimes, like if it's like a JPEG or something, and I do edit original, I might open it in Picture Viewer or whatever other program that they have, Microsoft Word or Paint or whatever. That's why I'll usually do reveal in Finder, but if it's a PSD file, you can just go edit original. And you can see that this document has a bunch of different things going on here. So I have a couple of different shoes in my image. So I have these folders that are containing the different shoe color variations that I went through in Photoshop. Right? We went through a couple demos about all that, etc. So I actually grouped the different edits. This is the destructive color editing because you can see I don't have any adjustment layers in here. but I grouped all of them together to come up with these different colors, okay? So these layers, if you remember, are the shoe 1, 2, 3. Just keep that in mind because we're going to actually open these back up in InDesign. I'm not going to save it. So what's interesting about InDesign is I can take one Photoshop file with multiple layers and I can display it, display the same file multiple times. So it can save on your file sizes. Now here's the thing. You don't want to have all of your shoes in your entire catalog in one Photoshop file because that'll make a humongous, massive Photoshop file. You want to do, I think you want to be a little bit careful in how you do it. So typically what I would do is I'd have one product and then I would have two different color variations, or three total different color variations for the one. All right, so for example, I'm going to click this shoe image, and then I'm going to go up to Object, and then Object Layer Options, okay? And now under my Object Layer Options panel box here, I see the exact same layers that I saw in my Photoshop file. So I'll turn, if I wanted to display, and this is what they'll call a hero image, or basically it's a fancy way of describing just a image that you want to have as the focus, your primary focus product item. So I'll click on shoe 1 to reveal that image, and then I'll turn off shoe 3. And I have my preview set here, my preview is on. And then I can turn off, I didn't name it properly, but it's layer 2 in my shoe 1 panel, and if I could turn it on or off, you can see that shadow kind of disappearing and reappearing again, okay? So I can turn that layer off too, and then hit OK. So instead of actually doing a save as with my shoe image, I can just turn the layers on or off in InDesign, you know? If I decide, you know, this doesn't look good with the family of other shoes, my color scheme's going on, then I can just quickly click it, go to Object, again, Object Layer Options, and then maybe just selecting another, you know, another color. And then again, I'll turn the, I will turn the shadow layer off, and then hit OK. And then the same for these. So I'll click that shoe, this kind of smaller one. I'll go to Object, Object Layer Options, and then turn another color scheme on, the red this time, and then hit OK. All right, so not really having to file and place everything, which you can do in InDesign, but this is kind of a faster way of doing it, okay? And easier to manage one file with 3 different variations than 3 different files, each with a different variation. It's just more manageable that way. Okay. For the other piece, what I can do is I'm going to actually do a copy. So I'm going to edit copy and then edit. Now, here's my paste options. So I can paste in place, which will paste an exact copy of what I just copied onto the copy that I just copied. Pixel perfect, right on top of it, exactly the same place. Or I could just paste, and it should just plop. Usually it just plops it anywhere on the design, but this time it pasted it in place, which is fine. So that's the difference between your basic paste or your paste in place. All right. So typically I'll do a copy and paste in place, and then what I'll do is actually I'll cut that. I'm going to go edit copy again. So I copied this. To do my shadow, right, I'm going to go to Object and then Object Layer Options again. And then under this color here, I'm going to turn off the main shoe image. Let's see where I got another one hiding. Oh, right here. And then I'm just going to keep the shadow piece on. Now remember, I copied it in its previous state. I hit OK. And then I'm going to go edit, paste in place. And it's just going to place the copy of the original on top of it. And then the reason being is that I want to set my shadow layer to multiply, and I'm going to keep my shoe layer to normal. Okay, because I don't want my shoe layer to blend in with other background images and so on and so forth, but I want my shadow to look like and act like a shadow. Then I'll just click and drag over both of these items, and then Object Group or Command G. Now I can manage this whole project a lot easier by moving this around as one piece, etc. Okay. So let's go through. I'm going to go through type, character styles, and so on and so forth at a later time. I'm going to give a brief general overview kind of some of these different aspects of InDesign as far as the drawing tools and stuff. So let me go File, New Document in InDesign. And this menu basically looks a lot like, exactly like everything else we've seen here. So I can set my units to inches. I'm going to go 8.5 by 11. Facing pages, with this option checked, this is basically telling me that I'm going to have a booklet facing pages, right? Just like how we had, here. So it's going to be a magazine spread essentially. But one other item to keep in mind, so I'm going to check it for this time. One thing to keep in mind is under here, under margins and bleed and slug. Bleed is the thing I want to talk about more so because that's pretty important. But basically what bleed is the area of space that comes off of the edge of the page. So typically, if you have a magazine, right, and the print runs off the end of the page, the printer doesn't print off of the end of the actual page. What happens is the printer will print past where the cut happens at the end of the page, okay? So there is really no such thing as bleed until the piece gets cut, right? Or there's no such thing as printing off the edges of the paper until the piece gets cut. So I'll show you that kind of in practice here. The standard really is a 1/8 of an inch, so 0.125. Top, bottom, inside, and outside. Okay, so I'm going to do create and then show you what these marks look like. Your page 1, even though we have facing pages, it's going to be your cover page, so that's going to be standalone always. But as I go down here under my pages panel and then hit this like new create new page icon here, if I keep clicking it, it's going to start adding facing pages and spreads. Okay, so what we're dealing with is 10-pager here. But in reality, something would have to be a divisible by 4 to be saddle stitched. So saddle stitching basically is the staples in the spine of your magazine. Okay, so I could even bring samples of that later. But here is InDesign with our invisibles on. So if I hit the W key, I can turn my invisibles on or off. So with my invisibles on, and me zooming in here, I can see like this is the bleed mark. So this is the mark at which the artwork will come off of the pasteboard. Okay, the printer will print this off of the pasteboard, and then I will cut right here on that white piece. Okay, so again, I'll turn my invisibles on and off, and you can see that my 0.125 inch bleed is disappearing behind the pasteboard. The pasteboard is this view is closest to what reality would be like. But, like let's say I wanted to have my, entire background, be, a color in my piece, and I wanted to bleed off the edge, I'd have to stretch this artwork out to this bleed mark. So if my entire background of this image was a Photoshop design or texture of some kind in Photoshop that I created, I'll click on it and I can see here the width and height would have to be 8.75 by 11.25 for it to completely bleed off the edge, and I can cut it that way. Okay. So if you're like working on an illustration or something, and it's really important to note that you should just ask the designer, like, what are, what's my bleed, what are my bleed dimensions and what are my live dimensions. Okay, so here's my live and then here's my bleed. Bleed in this case is 1/4 of an inch added to both the width and the height of the live dimensions. Okay, this other area here is my margin. So this is the space at which I would need from the live edge, okay, of the document. So that's kind of shown in this little, let's see on screen. Yeah, this it's really tough to see in there. Yeah, this purple pink line here. Why would that be important? And that can change too. Like in InDesign, I can change it, so I can go, change it on my, let's see, file, document setup. So in my file document setup area, I can change that too to make it. If I hit this unlink area, I can change the bleed to, let's say, like 1/4 of an inch or like even 1/2 an inch. If you get into like larger media sizes, like what are they, like a banner or something, or like a larger poster, then that bleed is the 1/8 of an inch bleed is a little too hard for the machines to really get exactly cut. It's just such an archaic process, the whole printing process in general. So then you have to add more bleed to make, kind of compensate. And that's where like communicating with the printer is helpful. So I just added 1/8 of an inch to everything there. And then to under margins and columns, then under layout, margins and columns, here's where I can change the, let's say the inside margin. Actually, let me cancel that and go margins again. If I want my outside margins to be one thing, but my insides to be another, I'm going to change my, oops, try that again. Let's try. Okay. So I'll make my insides to be like 3/4 of an inch, and my outsides I'll make them like 1/4 of an inch. All right, sort of like that. Now you can see that if this piece was like a spiral bound piece, right? Spiral binding is going to need more space or more free area on the left side, where the binding is, in order to compensate, right? So like I don't want type getting cut off from those little holes, the 3-hole punch or whatever. So that's where you would want to probably change up your margin there, to compensate for something like that. So in that way, as a designer, I can have a very clear sense of what my boundaries are in order to make sure that it doesn't get cut off in the design. So main drawing tools, or just tools in general for InDesign, are really going to be your type tool, and then also your frame tools here. So frame tool really is just click, drag, draw, and then go File, Place. And here I'm going to just place an image right there, so I'll grab it from here, just something that I have. So I placed this image here of these, fun pair of shoes. So the shoes are placed in this image box, and you can see like the whole entire shoe is not showing up through it. This is kind of a concept of InDesign. Typically, what's going to happen is you would just file place into a blank area of the design, and the full shoes would pop up. But if you draw an image box and you know my template needs an image based on what my margins are saying to be this, this wide, and I know I'm going to repeat this over and over again, you could just draw the box without having the artwork to place in there and just know that products are going to go in that way. A couple of things to note about these boxes here, these image frames, is that if I hover over it with my my selection tool here, this is the exact same kind of concept as Illustrator, so it's going to be V as my shortcut to that. And I click on this box, you can see I have a blue outline around it, and I can actually go to these corners and kind of stretch them or shrink them and so on and so forth, right? And you can see that the image behind or within this box is getting cut off or revealed as I kind of stretch it. So it's basically like a mask, really. It's a mask for the image in the box. Now, if I hit my direct selection tool, which is the white arrow key here, and then go over my image, you can see that I have this hand image coming up. And if I click on this, I can move this object around within the box. Okay, so direct selection is going to move the artwork within the image frame box and mask it along the way as I'm moving it around. The direct selection is actually going to move and resize the box itself. Okay. InDesign added this piece where if I have my direction selection tool selected and I hover over the image, you can see this little circle image coming up, and if I select that, I can see my hand tool coming up, and if I click and hold it, you can see a preview of the crop. Okay, that's going to happen there. It's kind of the difference between the selection, direct selection, and InDesign. Another piece of that is my direct selection. I can hover over that corner of that box and just kind of reshape this, if you will. All right, so just like in Illustrator, I can do that. Also, I can add points and paths. So under my pen tool, you can use your pen tool just as you would in any other software. But it has a little bit of a different effect in that you can use the pen tool to create an image box. Okay, what I'm going to do is do this add anchor point pen tool piece, and I'm just going to start adding anchor points here on my box. And then with my direct selection, then I'm going to just click and move this around so I can actually really, change the shape of this thing, if you will, a little more dynamically and so on. Okay. And again, the pen tool here, I'm going to just kind of draw a random shape. And you can, let's see, you can color this shape, just like you would in Illustrator as well. I mean, a lot of the tools here are like Illustrator's tools. You get the gradient as well. You get all the swatches and so on. I can just select a magenta one right away and then just double-click this foreground color swatch down here, just like Illustrator, and just select whatever color I want there. There's a lot more to color in InDesign, but that's kind of the gist of it, All right, so that can act like that. I can actually then place an object in this very abstract shaped image box too. I'll just go to File, then in Place, and I'll just pick like a different, image or whatever. All right. So real high level, really high level right now. All these basic tools and so on. I'm going to go more into the type, but really the type tools are the same as Illustrator. You can do the the type on the path tool in Illustrator, right? So like if I had my image here, my path. Not sure if anyone's really seen this, but I might as well just do it. I have take my type on path tool, click on a path that I have, and then I can just type whatever, and then it'll just follow that path. So I can do a Command A with my type selected, increase and decrease the size of the type, adjust all the leading. I'm sorry, the kerning, and then not the leading. Okay. Just for giggles, I'm going to see if I can just paste this image into it. Paste into. No, I can't make that a image box at all. All right. Just play around with it once you get there. But really, we are looking for basically getting as creative as possible. Whether or not you use the drawing tools and InDesign and so on, it doesn't really matter. But that's just a really high level right now of them. The type is really basic and straightforward. You already have type in here, but we're going to go over more of the character and paragraph style pieces of it, and then use the template to make things better. Let me, so one thing I'm going to do before I send you all to break in about like 7 minutes is sorry, my brain, is go over the project real quick. So once you download the template, okay, so just to recap, today we're going to have, we're going to get those assets from you. So I've got some of those assets from some of you already. Get those to me today. If you don't have them all, remember what I said. If you don't have everything, just turn in what you got on time, and then resubmit your stuff later, more complete, for a grade adjustment, just so you don't lose that 10 points for being late, okay? Just remember that too, like throughout the semester. So I'm looking for those today, all of your categories for the catalog piece. For February 7th, right, so let's see. When is February 7th? A week from Wednesday, what I'm looking for is just a spread with your shoe images placed, right, into the catalog piece. So what I am looking for essentially, and that is pages 10 and 11 of the catalog, okay? So what I'm looking for is not that much. I'm looking for this. All right, so I'm looking for the your shoes. So like your shoe style, but then I'm looking for the variations of that shoe style based on your Photoshop color editing, right? So this shoe here, it didn't really look like this shoe at first because I thought I could make the different other colors look better, like the other versions, right? And so this is all color edited in Photoshop, and I'm going to go through a demo on doing this and placing this in InDesign and so on after you get back. But this is really what I'm looking for, okay? And then the type styling as well. Between now and Wednesday evening, you probably could, well, maybe not. Between now and a week from today, you probably could get all of these shoes color corrected and placed before then. But I'm giving you till a week from Wednesday to get it, because we still have to go through a demo of changing the paragraph and character styles in the template. No, but what I'm looking for is the elements for my template to use. what I would recommend is to take the template, and if you remember, I showed you some of those samples where it took the template, but then they really kind of tweaked the template a lot. Like some of, maybe shoes were in different positions, or some had shoes this way and some had shoes that way, and they just kind of messed with the template. You can do that for sure, definitely. There's a lot of room to play with, especially when you get to some of these pages that don't have shoes. Like for instance, some of the students have taken this and probably said, yeah, I'm going to have this just break the grid like that, or whatever. Like, I would love for you to do that. Even if you didn't have shoes that didn't have this sideways profile, had like a top profile, and the shoe was like peeking out from the bottom or whatever. I mean, be creative. That's okay too. Essentially what I'm looking for is numbers. So the number of shoes that you see here, and this is a worst case scenario spread. This is like the busiest spread you could possibly have. You have 3 shoes on one side, 3 on the other, and then you have a bunch of, basically smaller versions of the shoe there. I'm looking for like a worst case scenario here, essentially. All right, so I'm looking for numbers, right? So at this point, I'm just looking for your worst case scenario, and then when we get to the rest of the pages, like this, break the grid. If you want to break the grid now too, I mean, you can. I'm open to that. So. But yeah, this is essentially what I'm looking for is a general look and feel. A general look and feel, and some shoes color corrected using the object layer styles. And then the character and paragraph styles, which we'll demo next class. But I'm going to run through a demo of doing the shoes when you get back, just kind of that workflow, okay?